Thank you for joining us today on our English live show. We welcome you to our special live stream today. Joined here with me in EnAble India is Mr. Tushar and Mr. Leon. EnAble India, a non-profit organization working on the ground for the last 2 decades and impacting thousands of persons with disability. Our vision is a world where persons with disability are taxpayers, active citizens, and nation builders. EnAble India believes that the nation and the world will benefit from seeing persons with disability as change agents and serve as a constant reminder for disability, for the need for inclusion for everybody. Let me introduce you Mr. Tushar. Tushar has worked as a research assistant in peer-to-peer project in 2015 to 16. He also worked as deaf empowerment trainer in Centum Grow from 2016 to 2018. He also worked as executive project associate in Access Mantra. Currently, he is working as a project coordinator in Here a Million under EnAble India. Tushar, can you tell me more about yourself, please?
So I'm from Gujarat, now working in Bangalore. I was born, I was not born deaf, but I turned deaf when I was, 1 year old. I'm from Rajkot, and I did my schooling there. That's first to 10th in Rajkot itself, in a deaf school. So I think once it completed, 11th and 12th I did it in Vadodara, and at the same time I was taught English, from Ishara Foundation, where they were hearing teachers who taught me English, and that sort of helped me in my language skills. Right. Once that was completed, I did my BA, BA in a university which was tied up with another university in UK. And that was a special course. It was BA in Applied Sign Language Studies. And once that was done, I think the experience is what you basically mentioned before. One was the peer-to-peer project that I did. I did work in Centum Grow as a trainer, and also in Access Mantra. And yeah, at the same time, I also did B.Ed, right? And this is focused on deaf education and how you, so that was more of my experience. And right now I'm working as a project coordinator in Here a Million.
Wonderful. So, Tushar, since you got this disability of hearing, what are the challenges you face on a day-to-day life basis?
So if I have to speak of challenges, there are a lot of challenges. One is, for example, even if I have to watch TV, there is no sign involved, right? There's no interpreter, there's no access to an interpreter, right? If I have to get access to information, news, stories, I really can't, without an interpreter, right? So that's a challenge. Before, what used to happen was I would ask my parents, to explain on what is happening, but they would give a very short description, right, of what is happening there. And now we see that there are more solutions, like because of YouTube and all that, there are organizations which actually convert news into sign language and publish it, so that the deaf can also benefit from that, right? But the only problem is the quality is not completely there yet, right? So some organizations have very good news information that is given, but some of it is very short, right? It is not exactly like how a hearing person in a news channel or journalist speaking for a long time. It is very shortened, and the shortened information is given, right? Another challenge I would say is I can communicate with my family and my friends, but the solutions I use right now is writing or gesturing, but it is not in par with how two hearing people would communicate, right? So even when I go outside, I still have to use gestures and written communication. So there's no complete access. Another example, if I have to give, it's like if I have to go to the doctor, right? If it's just a headache or something like that, I can just communicate. But what if it is a surgery? How would I understand that, right? In that case, we will have to bring an interpreter, and then that's the form of, that is how I get access to, that communication, right? and then maybe get more information in depth, right? But the issue again is there are not many interpreters.
So again, coming back to when you watch TV, the quality means the interpreter's quality. I mean, they end up saying the information in a short manner.
Yes, that's true. Especially with TV, I think when I see interpreters signing for a hearing person, some of them are not certified interpreters, right? So thereby, the quality is missing, right? And it also looks like their signs are very limited. They don't actually use words. And I also am able to see that what is spoken and what is signed is a little different. And facial expressions is very, very important for sign. I see that that's very limited in televisions, right? But now I think it's a little better. They're bringing better interpreters. But the only problem is it is limited time. The interpreter cannot spare his whole day. One being him tired and the other one is not be able to do it, right? So there are some associations which are advocating on this, but they are also bringing more interpreters and maybe like for example, also what they try to do is they edit videos, they make short forms of those videos of information, and so those videos could be anything. It could be entertainment, infotainment, it could be any thing, right? So, but the basic challenge is interpreters and communication.
So this also says about the environment where it is difficult for you to understand and communicate with other people. So moving on, Tushar, is your hearing loss worse on some days than the others? Or how do you overcome this challenge? Or is it same throughout?
Yeah, I understand the question. That's a good question. But I would like to, that's a funny question to me because when it comes to hearing loss, right? For example, now it's really hot, right? Doesn't mean that my hearing gets better, or after 1 week my hearing, I can hear more, right? So it's not miracle. It's not. It doesn't work that way, right? Now I was born deaf, and I will be deaf till I die, right? That's the truth, right? So there's no way around it. This is natural as a deaf person.
It's constant.
Yes, it is constant. So there is no, yeah.
Because few people, they are able to hear in a partial manner, but then when days go on, it actually deteriorates.
Yes, that's very true. I'm completely deaf, but there are some people who, as you mentioned, their hearing deteriorates. Maybe it also is to do with age, or maybe it is a sickness that they incurred on a later stage. And or for example, a person meets with an accident and he loses his hearing, right? So the reason for being deaf can be very different, but as you said, yeah, there is a high possibility of deterioration of hearing, right? Some of them, what happens is when they were born, they might be able to hear for some time of their life, and they learn how to speak, right? So that is their natural self. You can call it a skill where they're able to speak and communicate, right? But in my case, I was always deaf, right? So I can't speak, and then I always refer to my parents' gestures. And once I went to school is when I learned how to sign, right? So that is why I am completely sign user.
So, Tushar, moving on. Everyone have their hobbies. So what do you enjoy doing the best as your hobby?
I would say I love playing cricket. That's something that I've been very fond of from a very young age, and I'm crazy about cricket. And once I started working is when I stopped playing cricket, but I still watch cricket, right? I love reading the news. I like to get information. And the third thing would be traveling. I love to travel, right? And the last thing is to just communicate with my deaf peers.
Okay. Another curious question from my end. So, would you be able to hear to any music? Or let's say if you are hearing a music, would you be able to feel it? Because I just came across this person on a television interview. She is deaf, as you said. Her hearing deteriorated when she was very young. But then she is also a musician. So how she feels that music is through the vibration. So does it differ for people to people? How is it, Tushar?
Yeah, so with regards to music, I don't like music because there's no experience. But there are some deaf people who do enjoy music, right? Who love music. As you said, rightly said, it is vibration, and feeling those vibration is one way they enjoy the music. Or like for example, if there is a speaker, right? They go very close to the speaker and sort of feel the beats. Some of them use headphones also. The thing is, they might not be able to hear the lyrics, but the beats is something that they would feel, right? So I have seen deaf people who connect to their phones and listen to music. I have seen, but yeah.
Okay. Another question, Tushar. So let's say you're going for a small group discussion, and that's let's say that's a bad luck for you that you have been there, but there's no interpreter. How will you try to manage that? Have you been in that situation?
So if it is a group of hearing people and then I'm part of that group, right? What I would try to do is check if some of them know science, right? Maybe if there are one or two people who know basic science, I can sort of, especially if it is my team, right? I would have taught them sign language. I would, they're not actual interpreters, but just a communication support, right? Maybe they could just give me important points on what the group is discussing. So that is one solution that I would use. If there is no interpreter, what I would do is I would try to communicate through writing, right? Either writing on a paper or a phone. Another thing that I would use is natural gestures. Maybe I can use the gestures and able to understand. But the only thing is there is a lot of patience that is required from the hearing people because that communication gap is there, right? If it is, and even again, if it is a very basic group discussion, then it's easy to write and understand. But if it's an intense group discussion, then I definitely need an interpreter, right? Because there are people debating, people talking to each other, so an interpreter would be vital at that point.
Okay. So, Tushar, from what we spoke and till where we are now, I understand an interpreter is very much helpful, useful, and much needed for a person with hearing disability. But then, how do you feel when your words are interpreted by an interpreter? How do you feel about this?
I would say when an interpreter is brought in, and if the interpreter is very qualified, right, that is when I'm satisfied, right? Or I know that interpreter from before, it's maybe we are from the same culture, right? Those things will really help, and the sign words, if the interpreter knows these sign words very well, that also is going to help, right? Because when I sign, there's a lot of facial expressions and the body language that I do. And if the interpreter is able to sort of comprehend and voice out the same thing, that means, it's basically like saying, I'm speaking, right? So the interpreter is just the voice there. So I would say when it comes to language, it doesn't matter if it's Hindi or English or whatever, but ISL it can be ISL to English or Hindi, meaning to say the interpreter could voice it in two different languages, right? Yeah.
Okay. So I understand the struggles that you face in your daily day-to-day life, but then how do you adapt to changes in life? For example, let's say using the latest technology like mobile phones, or let it be anything, or your work, or this current situation, or your education. How do you do that?
I think technology has been something that's always helped the deaf, right? And now we have access to internet, YouTube. Again, information is there. Instagram is giving out a lot of information, right? So it's easy to adapt to changes in that case, right? If I have to speak about a couple of years back, even before when we had internet and we were using phones only for calling, it was very difficult to speak to a person who lives a little far. Now, if you had to communicate something, I had to, ask my dad to call that person's father or friend, speak to him, and him communicating with the deaf person, right? So there was a lot of dependency on people, right? And we also used to use SMS, but like for example, we would just say, "Hi, how are you? Are you free to meet?" And then we would meet. But now because of the advancement in technology, it's very easy. We just do a video call, and I feel we are more independent. We don't have to depend on our family, right? With regards to YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram, basically social media definitely helps us, right? It gives us a lot more information. We are just able to see and get more information. This is providing more access, right? This was something that was missing a couple of years back, but now I would say it is more accessible for us, right? And for work, now Zoom has helped us a lot, right? Because when we meet through Zoom, when we use Zoom, we can directly connect with interpreters. We can ask interpreters to join through Zoom. They don't have to come to a location, right? Because before, the challenge was to find an interpreter, asking them to come. Like for example, there are not many good interpreters in Bangalore. Now, if I have to bring an interpreter from Delhi, I have to pay for their travel, their food, their stay, and it's difficult, right? But Zoom, it's simple. You just connect through Zoom, and I pay you for your service, right? So that is simplified. And also, I think there are about 18 million deaf people in India. That is the statistics. And how many interpreters? Just very few, right? I think the statistics says 250 interpreters, but the collected data is 250. But I feel now maybe there are around 500 interpreters. But the problem is not all of them are qualified.
Quality is not there.
Right? There's no quality, right? So it is difficult, and to find an interpreter is very challenging. And once we find an interpreter, it's easy to communicate. But through Zoom, it's much easier, right? I can connect with an interpreter from anywhere, any location, and they can just connect.
Another question is that in Zoom, you have interpreter who interprets your sign language. So it becomes easy for you to understand and reply or ask a question. But then while you're watching, say, Instagram, YouTube, or Facebook, even then there's a closed caption with the video. They're not perfect for anyone. Sometimes it's incorrect. So in this kind of situation, what do you do when the closed captions are incorrect? You'll not be able to understand. So what do you do in that place?
Right. I think you're referring to maybe YouTube videos. If there's audio in those videos, and the closed caption comes, right? And there's no interpreter.
And
right?
if the closed captions are incorrect?
That's true. That's a good question. That's a challenge again. For example, if I have to speak of the education of deaf in the country, right? It's not very good. It's not up to the mark, right? Because most of them know very less sign language. Most of them are using gestures as main source of communication, right? But there is no, really perfect sign language in that case, right? So what is happening is because of their growing up and not understanding, like some of the teachers are very strong on asking deaf to voice out. So the sign is a little weak, right? So the sign is missing. And ISL, Indian Sign Language, is not very strong amongst the community as well. So that in turn impacts the education of the kids, right? When they grow up, their signs are good, but again, when it comes to right, some of them are skilled, and some of them are not able to understand the video sometimes, right? Like what happens with YouTube and subtitling is the English, or like for example, the person who is voicing out and his captioning is sort of, it doesn't matter if it's correct or not correct, it's difficult for some to understand, right? To comprehend even that is very difficult. So the best solution in this case is bringing an interpreter and having an interpreter, because what happens is sign language is a natural language for the deaf, right? So it is their own natural language, and the secondary language is English or written form of communication, right? But that again, not many deaf people are able to comprehend completely, right? So with regards to social media and all that, although there is a dependency of captioning, but the most important thing is to have an interpreter. Again, captioning also is difficult. For example, if I'm watching a movie, now there is a lot more change. Like for example, this movie called 83, which is a very famous movie. It's a beautiful movie, but without an interpreter, I wouldn't be able to enjoy, right? But now we have an organization called ISH, which has made the whole movie with interpretation supports. There is a signer at the end, on the side of the screen and signing, right? So that is complete access, right? That's still better than subtitling, right? When it comes to some TV channels, some TV channels have interpreters, but not all. And I want all the TV channels to have interpreter, right? This is going to help a lot of hearing people as well to understand deaf culture, right? So they would understand that maybe parents who are hearing and they have a deaf child, they will have more respect towards the child, saying that, oh, there is sign language, which is more important and equal to hearing, right? So what is happening right now is they feel like signing is like monkey language, right? It's just gesturing. They're saying, okay, they're not able to think clearly. They're mentally challenged, right? A lot of things that happens with parents itself. But if they start seeing sign language on TV and on every channel, this is going to create a bigger impact, right? I think sometime back, Prime Minister Modi announced that ISL should be equal, right? And those announcements were made. Some hearing people now feel that yes, ISL means something, right? So then we have to start encouraging people to start using sign language, right? Now, because of that influence, now we do see that there is a rise in sign users, and the respect for sign language is more. The value for it is increased.
So you said ISL, Indian Sign Language. So is this sign language the same when you go to America or UK or anywhere as a part of the world? Or do they have their own sign language which is certified? Is there any variation among them?
Yes. So I think across the globe, if you consider all countries, right, ISL will definitely not be beneficial for American user, right? So it's very different. The sign language that is used in India and America's used, like just like how it is Hindi or English, right? It's very different. It's a different language. French and Urdu is very different, right? So likewise, sign language. Likewise with sign language, right? It's very different from Indian Sign Language is very different from American Sign Language. UK has BSL, that's British Sign Language, right? So yeah, like for example, the comparison is that like how you have normal languages, which is very different apart from each other. Sorry, it's very different from each other. It's with sign language.
See, I do not know sign language. Or let's say any of my friends who would like to meet you, or anyone who is coming to meet you for the first time will not know a sign language. And if you want them to communicate with you, how would you ask them to communicate with you? Let's say there's no interpreter. Is there any other way?
So if, right, so when I'm meeting you, the first discussion or the first time I'm meeting you, like I can use normal gestures, like for example, these things are easy to understand, good morning, or this is thank you. These are all very basic sign language. It's not that you have to learn sign language. If you have interest, you can learn sign language as well. There are YouTube videos, there are different ways of learning sign language. Again, these are all basic forms of the language learning, right? So interpretation is a different thing, where the interpreters will complete a 2 years course, and that's how they connect it, So especially what you can do is, if you want to learn sign language and there's an interest, you can join in workshops that we conduct, where it's all completely sign language, right? But for faster communication, if sign language is not a way, then written language, or I would write something and show it to you, or gesture it out.
Okay. So on a piece of paper, write it down that what you want to tell or what they want to communicate, and then in that manner you can communicate. Well said. So Tushar, what do you see, or do you see the positive side of being deaf? What is it? They say when one of the sense goes down, the rest of the signs go up and then they increase.
Right. So when I was I was born deaf, and I've never had the hearing side, never had the hearing perspective because I never could hear anything, right? But the positive thing about the community is, especially with schools, you do see that there are other kids who are just like you. I'm not alone, right? Because what happens is growing up, I see people speaking. But when school, I do see there are other deaf people, there are signers, and there's more networking that way, right? So I do feel that I have gained my identity as a person, and I'm proud of it, right? So even if it is, again, this latter part of your question is one of my sense definitely isn't there, that's hearing, but I am very strong when it comes to visuals, right? And anything, and I'm able to capture. I'm not very distracted that way. My visuals are very strong, right? So that's likewise with the other deaf people as well, right? And if there are things, and then just things in general. Thing is, I can really remember faster, and I feel that my memory is better than hearing people, right? So it is like, it's also because of signing, right? So I'm signing the items 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 my fingers, and I'm able to remember. So I feel very proud to be deaf, and that's a positive, right? Now, deaf community are very proud that they have sign language, right? And I'm very proud to be part of the deaf community as well. And when we speak amongst the community, there's a lot of learning. We also speak on how to tackle challenges and find solutions, right? So these solutions, if you are solution oriented, you're able to sort of bring in solutions, right? So basically, what I would say, I'm really proud that I'm deaf.
Really, really thankful to have you here with us. And dear listeners, I would like to now welcome the most important other person to the show. That's Leon D'Souza, who's been interpreting this entire program for us. From Tushar, whatever the sign he's been doing, he's being interpreted by Leon. So let me give a brief about Leon D'Souza. Leon has been working in the disability sector for the last 8 years as a deaf ally and part-time sign interpreter. Currently, he is serving as a project manager for the Hear a Million project at EnAble India. So, thank you so much for being here, Leon. So, Leon,
thank you as well.
Welcome. Leon, what made you choose this profession? What do you like the most about being an interpreter?
So I would answer while signing at the same time, right? So the first question you asked me was, why did I choose this interpreter profession, right? If I have to give a little backstory of myself, I happened to learn sign language during the course of my education. I learned sign language, and then later started volunteering with EnAble India. This is back in 2016, and that's how I got in touch with deaf people. I went to companies where deaf people are working, and then I started interpreting slowly. But I am not a certified interpreter. My learning of sign language is only because of connecting with deaf, right? So as I said, I think I've also mentioned I'm a part-time interpreter, meaning to say that I'm the backup interpreter, right? So you have professional interpreters coming and signing. If they're not there, then I'm the backup interpreter, trying to, the goal is providing access for the deaf, right? So yeah, I think the second question was, what do you like about sign language interpretation? I think just this, being part of, being part of the deaf community is just beautiful, because you learn their culture, you learn the way of their thinking, right? So as an interpreter, it's very important for me to understand these things. So it's just a whole different group of people, right? Who are very similar, but we think in different ways, right? So that is very fascinating to understand and learning that. And another benefit is I just, as I said, love the deaf culture, and just being part of, just hanging out with deaf people. There are a lot of learnings that we have, right? So one thing that I would want to say is, deaf people are very united. The community is very, very strong, right? And the community is very vocal, very loud. They advocate for themselves. and that's something that amazes me, right? And that is something that I like about being an interpreter. And on a regular basis, I'm not an interpreter. With Tushar, we both are in the same team. So we just communicate using sign language. So I'm not an interpreter there, right? So I would also say I'm a sign user and also an interpreter at the same time, right? So yeah.
So when it comes to a job, every job that we do is challenging. So what is the most challenging part of your job, Leon?
So I would say every deaf individual is very different, right? Different in which way? The way they sign, the way they understand sign, right? And sign language is also, slightly different with regions, right? When it's in the south, there are some differences in sign. In the north, there are some differences in sign. Now, what happens is when I'm signing or interpreting, a person from the north might not be able to understand me completely because some signs, my signs might be influenced through the south sign language, right? So it might be difficult to sort of understand. So that is a challenge, right? As an interpreter, because interpreters, again, even if they're certified, they're from a region, right? And if you come to, like, say, for example, Kerala, a deaf person will be using different sign language, a little bit different, right? But one good thing is, if you know that person and you work with him, it's easier for you to understand. So why interpreter needs to understand is because they have to voice it out, right? If they're not able to understand the sign, then there's no voicing it out. Then it will be a very different way. Like, for example, now Tushar, he's signing, I'm able to understand completely because we've been working together for a long time, right? So it might not be the same with a new deaf person. Maybe I might not understand him completely, right? That's a challenge with all the interpreters. Sometimes, but there are few interpreters that are very good because, like, for example, I would want to say codas. Codas. Codas are children of deaf adults. Basically, parents are deaf, and the kids are called codas, right? So, Tushar, you want to explain more on codas? So, again, as yeah, so the parents are deaf in this case, and the kids are hearing, but they've learned sign language because parents, that becomes their mother tongue, right? Like, for example, they have both benefit. One is being part of the family where they learn sign language and the whole world of deaf, and the second thing is they also are part of the hearing world, right? That way, what's happening is they're very perfect in sign language. Sign. So we have some coda interpreters in India, and there's an association for codas as well, right? Yeah. So those are amazing. So why I mentioned codas are they're better interpreters because because they've learned sign language from a very young age and they're able to understand deaf no matter how different they are, right? For me, it will be a challenge because I don't know and I've not grown up signing, right? So yeah, that's a challenge that I would say.
So let me ask this question to Tushar. Tushar, you were telling the quality of the interpreters were not up to the mark. So if anyone who would like to become an interpreter, what is that education or skills that are needed to become an interpreter? From your perspective, because you said, it's not up to the mark. So could you please answer that?
If an interpreter wants to, if a person wants to become an interpreter, right? There is a course that he or she can apply, learn that course, be part of the course for 2 years. And this also teaches you, there are things like interpreters ethics, right? For example, confidentiality, following the exact sign and all that. So there are a lot of ethics that an interpreter has to follow. But it doesn't mean that once the course is done, an interpreter becomes proficient, right? He or she has to be part of that community, has to learn the culture, right? Has to understand different individuals who are deaf, right? Need to know that there is a difference in background, right? So once that is done, that is where an interpreter is able to match the community, right? I also want to inform you that the interpreters are also very different. Like how deaf people are very different. Interpreters are all, very different as well. It's not that every interpreter will be just, like for example, different people have different length of shoes, right? So it's not that everyone has the same size, like 7 or 8, right? It's not possible. People have different shoe size, right? Likewise with interpreters as well. What happens is people are very different, right? Some of them are able to understand, some of them are able to communicate well with the deaf, some are a little different, right? So example, I think I'll give you another example, right? So if there's an interview and a job, there's a job interview for a deaf person, right? And the interviewer is a hearing person. So what happens is the hearing person doesn't decide on who the interpreter is, because the interpreter might not be able to understand the deaf person, right? So before the interview itself, the deaf person considers the interpreters. He might meet him before, and then bring in an interpreter so that communication is faster.
So we have come to the end of the program, and this is the final question that I would like to ask. Is there anything that you would like to tell to the people watching the show and listening to the program? Would you like to say anything, Tushar?
So again, with the hearing people who are watching the show and watching me sign, you might think, oh, what is this? Sign language? I don't know. I mean, deaf people, should I show sympathy, right? So one thing that I would say is definitely accessibility is one very important thing. We have to make sure everyone gets access, right? So you might feel, oh, what is this sign language? I can't sign, right? Don't worry. Sign language is a basic natural language for the deaf, right? And you don't have to be worried to come and speak to a deaf person. You're not going to eat you up, right? So you can be part of the community. You can learn basic sign language. You can actually try to understand a deaf person, understand the need of a deaf person, right? Likewise, how, when I spoke about interpreters, how they learn, and there's a background to how they start learning, right? So you hearing people can also start learning. You can start with basic sign language, right? Important thing is to include everyone, and inclusion happens only with communication. Right?
I really thank you so much, Tushar and Leon, especially Tushar, for sharing your perspective, your points. And often we see people, when a sign language person is signing, maybe near a store or outside, when an ordinary people see him, they really look at him in a weird manner. I think which we all should avoid. We should try to be a part of their community, at least understand what they're saying, or do not look weird at what they're doing. So this brings to the conclusion of the program. If you have your thoughts, your feedbacks, you can always write to us. And you can call us at 6364 252164. You can also email it to us at info@febaonline.org. I would like to thank EnAble India for giving us this opportunity. I would also thank Mr. Tushar and Mr. Leon for being a part of this program and add information about the deaf and the disabled community. Dear listeners, once again, thank you. Stay safe. God bless.